Welcome to this session. It's actually a response to some of the feedback we got at last year's Summer Institute, where some of you who came to the Institute learned various things, were curious about where the administrators stood on some of these issues. So we've invited a panel of premier administrators to talk a little bit about that particular subject. Now I'm going to moderate it just a little bit differently for a panel. Before I introduce them, I'm going to give you some information about them and see if you can figure out who is who. So, the doctorates in the group include a doctorate in business administration, a doctorate in biochemistry and molecular biology, a doctorate in education administration, and a doctorate in physical inorganic chemistry. So take a look at these faces. See what you think. And now let me share some insights from their personal lives. Just a few little titillating tidbits. One of these folks has 20 years as a college baseball umpire. I believe that includes umpiring 7-year-olds. One of these folks is an autocross racer, specific to Corvettes. One of them has 25 years officiating high school football, and in addition, has done a good bit of work in the field of alligator wrestling. And who have I forgotten here? Let's see. Oh, yes. The last one has the largest collection of jazz CDs in the state of Georgia, and we'll take on all comers to prove it. So have you figured out who's who? One. So let me start on my left with Dr. Dennis Chamberlain. He is currently the Vice President for Student Affairs at Gordon State College. He has been a superintendent of Lamar County Schools for 6 years, and a principal of several other schools. He holds a doctorate in education administration. And do you know which hobby? Would the real Corvette driver please stand? And then we have Dr. Max Burns, who currently serves as president of Gordon State College. Prior to that, he was the dean of the Mike Cottrell School of Business at North Georgia College and State University. Before that, he was one of our congressmen and served on the Education Committee in the House of Representatives. He's been a professor at a number of international universities and holds a PhD in business administration. And what would you say his hobby is? Correct. When I asked him what I could talk to him about, tell about him, he said, just make something up.
Now, the high school officiating was true.
Yes, okay, the high school officiating was actually true. And then we have Dr. Zavi Safran, who is Vice President of Academic Affairs at Southern Polytechnic State University. He has a PhD in physical inorganic chemistry. Before starting at Southern Poly, he served as Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty at New England College. Is published in the fields of environment and chemistry, and has a blog called The Weekly Blab. And those of you who knows me might get the context there. And he is the owner of Jazz CDs. And finally, we have Dr. Jerome Drain, who's the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Atlanta Metropolitan State College. He has his doctorate in biochemistry and molecular genetics, has taught widely in those particular fields, and has served as biology department head, dean of arts and sciences, and division chair of sciences at various institutions. So we have indeed a very distinguished panel, and by the way, he does work with 7-year-olds on the baseball field. So what I'd like to do is start it out with a question for everyone to answer, and then sort of mix the questions around and have some of the panelists decide who's the best person to answer. I also want to do one other thing a little bit differently, and that is to, rather than saving the audience questions for the end, I have a list of questions, so we won't run out of things to ask. But if you'd like to go ahead and make sure you get a question in, I know frequently the audience questions get shuffled and we run out of time. I'm going to give you the opportunity after their opening comments to go ahead and ask some questions. So I'd like each of them to respond to the question of talking a little bit about the role of PLA within their campus completion plans. And Dr. Drain, would you like to start?
I will. Thank you, Trish. Good afternoon. For us at Atlanta Metropolitan State College, the adult learner was a target in our Complete College Georgia plan. And the adult learner at AMSC now, that wasn't anything really new for us, the adult learner. At Atlanta Metropolitan State College, 55% of our students are adult learners. And just last year, that number has gone down to about 45%. So part of our emphasis really was on how to specifically target the adult learner. So we created some ways that we think are beneficial in targeting the adult learner. We have multiple start times. We started something that's called multiple start times fall of 2011. And with the multiple start times, we have the traditional 15-week semester, as many of us do. We have 2 mini-semesters, but we also have a 12-week semester. So the 12-week semester starts 3 weeks after the 15-week semester starts, and we also have a 5-week semester. So the idea with the multiple start times really is to allow the adult learner to enter into the college at any time. We also have an evening and weekend college. So we're open very early in the morning. 6 o'clock is our first class. And students can take classes. Our last lab ends at 10:45. So we're open all day, 7 days a week. Now with that, we've also instituted other activities to make sure that we're servicing the adult learner. For example, our admissions office is open until 7 p.m. during the week. We offer advising until 7 p.m. As well as financial aid. And of course, our tutoring services are open 7 days a week. So we really do believe that we have the services for the adult learner population. We've also started to look at options such as the stackable certificates. So we have business and information technology certificates, and we will launch a law enforcement leadership certificate March 11th. And the idea behind these certificates is it allows those students who may not have attended college in quite some time to get their feet wet with a certificate program. And then those credits, of course, can transfer into the college. So we're really, really excited about the stackable certificates. And within those stackable certificates, PLA, I believe, will become an option for many of the students. For example, in our Law Enforcement Leadership Academy, we are targeting police officers. And many of these police officers have taken the post-compass, so they've taken the compass. Some have college credits, and some do not. But one of the courses in particular, for example, is our Introduction to Law Enforcement. Well, police officers have gone through 410 hours of post-training where they're taught how to become a police officer. So one of the classes that I really do believe that PLA or the students would benefit from using PLA would be Introduction to Law Enforcement. So we're really excited about the opportunities that we have with the stackable certificate programs. Now, the PLA program was approved by our faculty 2 years ago, and I thought that it would be more of a challenge. But at Atlanta Metropolitan State College, several things was happening. So we had attrition, so we hired a lot of new people. So the new people that we hired They fell right into place. They didn't know any better. But our faculty really do realize, especially at an access institution, that helping students obtain a degree using prior learning was very important, and they really did buy into that. And as I said, was much surprised, but welcomed their opinions around prior learning.
Yes. Good afternoon. At Southern Polytechnic State University, a lot of the ways that we're using prior learning assessment is something that arises through our mission as a university. And we're a technological university, and so all of our programs are heavily applied. And so if you've got applied programs and you don't give credit to applied learning, right, then you're really not giving any credence to your own mission. And so it's something that's very important to us. Similar to Atlanta Metro, again, by virtue of the fact of being an applied university, we have a lot of students who come in from industry. And so a lot of adult students, a lot of students who have taken some time out and then come back to school. And we try to serve those students as well as our more traditional students. Now, in addition to this, right, as a technology university, as I'm sure most of you are aware, Georgia has a second university system, and that's the technical college system of Georgia. And as a university, we've kind of taken the point in terms of articulating with the technical colleges. So a very large amount of prior learning assessment and credit transfer that we do comes through the technical colleges. We have several programs that are articulation programs with them, both at the Bachelor's of Science level and at the Bachelor of Applied Science level, which is a little bit more flexible. And so we deal with things that way. In terms of implementing it in Complete College Georgia, it's one of our strategic plan strategies. And one of the places that I think we're going to see us using it more is in terms of industrial certifications. As I said, a lot of our students come in having worked or currently working, right, in industrial settings as engineers, as technicians, as things like that. And in many cases, they've gathered industrial certifications along the way, things like Cisco certification and so on. And a number of our degree programs are looking at how we might credentialize those, right? What courses, what outcomes those certificates, those certifications guarantee that the students have met, and how we might be able to grant credit for them. We're a pretty conservative campus in terms of implementation of PLA, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, and so the way we've done it on our campus is each department is determining, right, just how far they want to go with this. So there's a certain minimum, right, that all departments do, which includes things like the Dantes, the advanced placement, CLEP exams, international baccalaureate, things of that nature. Some of our departments will do portfolios, others don't. Some will do challenge exams, some will do challenge exams in only certain courses, right? And we've left that at their option, but one of the things that we're seeing is as they get into it, they're beginning to broaden their outlook. And so several departments that started off very, very narrow are now considering doing a few other things as they see some of their colleagues are doing them, and once they've gotten a little more awareness of what prior learning assessment is. I don't think we've had quite as easy a time, I think, in convincing folks as perhaps my colleague did here. Our faculty, I think, walked in very skeptical, okay, about the whole concept of prior learning assessment. I think there's some concern that they're going to be called upon to grant credit for things that they don't think really meet the mark. Of course, some of our faculty don't necessarily think we should grant credit for a transfer course from Georgia Tech either, okay? But, you know, that's more of an SPSU thing, okay? But once they've realized that we're not talking about giving credit for experience, but only giving credit for carefully documented and assessed learning, right, then a lot of the concerns fade away, and they're willing to at least go some distance down the road in terms of getting on board the prior learning assessment train. And so I'm pretty confident that as we continue, we're going to see increasingly large buy-in. We're also the campus that's going to be offering the online course to train people in prior learning assessment. And so I'm proud that our campus has taken on that responsibility, and I'm looking forward to seeing that happen. And I guess I'll conclude by saying, you know, a lot of us are reading in the Chronicle of Higher Education or in the AJC or wherever about lots of seismic changes, right, that are heading our way in higher education. And to me, maybe the most important thing about prior learning assessment is that it helps us address those things. Okay, students are going to come to us having gained their knowledge in various things in lots of different ways than they do now. How large will this be? None of us know. Okay, but the concepts, okay, of PLA allow us to deal with, I think, the range of ways that students learn today and with the way that they're going to learn tomorrow. And as such, I think it's a critical part of how any university is going to address the new normal.
I want to interject just a minute. Both Dr. Drain and Dr. Saffron represent institutions that have been with the consortium for a bit. And so they're sitting at a position where some of the culture change with faculty has occurred. I did want to relate a story of, I think, the first or second time I met Zvi, which was at a conference on prior learning assessment. And he was at the time fulminating about this particular concept and how it was being played out at different places and whether it was going to work or not work. And he's made it work on his campus, and we're very grateful for that work. So Gordon College is one of our newer institutions. So I'd like you to share where you are.
Thank you, Trish. First of all, I'd like to thank you for opening this session by letting everyone know we're the only thing standing between them and going home. That was nice. Yeah. Yeah. I also want to thank whoever made the mistake of asking a student affairs person to be up at this table with all the important people. And Mary Ellen, I hope you don't get in trouble for that decision. But since I am up here, if you take a picture so I can put it in my scrapbook, it would be helpful. Yeah. I've also never been on a panel with my president before. So if I say anything that he contradicts, understand I am completely wrong and don't know what I'm talking about, okay? Now, I think I really got asked to be up here because you can tell from looking that I've had many years of experience being over 25. So I want to start a little bit with, from the admissions standpoint, the whole concept of the adult learner, PLA, and all of those things is drastically changing the dynamics of what we do in the area of student affairs. I'll hit admissions just for a minute and then come back to it. You know, we could be dealing with a 25-year-old adult learner who's very computer savvy, or we could be dealing with a 55 or a 50-year-old who's coming back to college after having been in the workplace and maybe not have any computer skills. So that rolls into maybe the changes, for example, in our counseling department, where you've got people with different stressors and different points of tension, because rather than the 18-year-old, you've got a 25, a 35, or a 45-year-old who is maybe going through a divorce, has children at home, has lost a job, and is coming back to college to go into a new career. They've got a whole different set of issues than what you may be dealing with if you're dealing with a traditional student. Student activities, for example. The interest of an adult learner is going to be very different from the interest of that traditional age student. So the types of activities would be different. The timing of the day or the scheduling would be very different. Our on-campus students have a totally different schedule of the day and evening than maybe an adult learner who was a commuter. We do have some adult learners who are residents. Well, they actually would prefer a different living arrangement than a dorm full of 18-year-olds. So whether you have a wing or a floor or a building that is designated for an adult learner might be something that you want to consider. Some of the other things that come up because of that adult learner and their scheduling and what they do is what their opinion is about your fee structures and for what activities. Because they may think that, you know, I'm never going to a ball game there. Why do I have to pay an activity fee? Or an athletic fee, rather. Or an activity fee when you don't have anything that I'm interested in. How about having something for my family and children that I can bring them back to campus? And the whole idea of the PLA is to attract those adults to our campus because we're trying to give them a reason to come to us. Assuming we are successful at that, then we need to look at restructuring our mindset about what we do with all those non-academic things that go on our campus. And there are a slew of them. There are all those different things. And it does create, and those are sort of the altruistic student service things that we should be concerned about. But there's also a pragmatic point of this too. In this budget climate, who doesn't want more students and more tuition? You know, there's a pragmatic part of this where that is of benefit to the institution. If you look at all of the data on RPG, on complete college, our adult learners complete at a higher rate. They are retained at a higher rate. A lot of, if any of you were in the meeting today on the CLEP, if you look at the brochure they gave you, it goes right down the line of the benefits that the adult learners bring to your campus from an academic side. The other thing that you have to pay attention to are the different needs, for example, of financial aid for the adult learner. Have they been to college just a few years earlier? Are they going to run out of Pell? Do they run out of financial aid? So there are a number of different issues that PLA and all these things that we're looking at for adult learners, we have to look at it in a bigger scope than just in the classroom because they are on our campus for a purpose. They're very motivated, they're very dedicated, but you may have to look at moving classes to the weekend, later in the evening, because they're working and they're coming later. All of those things that relate to that adult learner is very different from your traditional student.
The good news is I get the last word, so I can contradict Dennis, and it won't hurt anyone, will it? But let me thank you for being here. Boy, it's late in the afternoon on Tuesday, and you've got lots to do, but you stuck around. That's a compliment to you. I appreciate that. It's interesting that we've got two chief academic officers. We have a head of student affairs and a president. And the bottom line is, if you don't have that leadership engaged on your campus, you won't get there, will you? My good friend and colleague Tim Mascon here, and I know many of our other presidents have attended prior sessions. But this was an opportunity for me, as a new president in the system, to learn more effectively about not only prior learning assessment, but all of the Adult Learning Consortium's initiatives. So let's just chat a few minutes. We're not as far along as our friends at Southern Poly or at Atlanta Metropolitan. We do have some good faculty in the room. By the way, our Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs is here, and he leads that initiative on our campus. We have our counselors here, our student advising and counseling. We have our faculty. We have the chairman of our, former chairman of our faculty senate here. He's in the house somewhere. It was. There you go. And so we're beginning to get and filter down throughout the faculty and staff about adult learners and about the need for prior learning credit. On my desk, I have the Atlanta Business Chronicle's 25 largest colleges and universities that serve the metropolitan Atlanta region. Now, for your edification, Gordon State College is number 25, okay? But I want you to know we can't be 24 until we're 25. Hey, we made the list. At least we made the list, right? By the way, both of these other schools are on that list too. But let me tell you, there are 3 schools on that list that are not public universities or even private nonprofits. They're private for-profits. And you can probably guess who they are, but my question is, why are they there? And the answer is access, flexibility, and prior credit. All right, and boy, I really like what our friends at Atlanta Metro are doing. I think it would scare my registrar to death if I took that schedule and laid it on the table and said, okay, we're going to have, but that's a tremendous benefit, and I know it is. It's also a tough nut to implement, I'm sure of that. It is huge. Let me say that from a leadership standpoint, we have to determine strategically where this fits within our mission. And we have to determine, and you've heard the focus on Complete College Georgia, and it's certainly there, and how this ties to Complete College Georgia, how it ties to our future. We have 25% of our students, not 45, but 25% of our students are adult learners. I was on campus in spring, and I ran into a young lady who stopped me, introduced herself, and said, I'm probably the oldest student you have at Gordon. I said, really? I said, if you don't mind my asking, how old are you? She said, I'm 68. And my goal is to finish my associate's degree with my granddaughter. Okay? Now, what she really wanted me to do was to waive her math requirements. Okay? Because she was struggling with math. She hadn't seen a math class in 50 years. You think she was having trouble with math? And you have the same kind of stories. Now, I didn't waive her math requirements because I don't have that flexibility. The faculty has to decide what the requirements are, and I help enforce those. But I did get her to our Student Success Center, which we have an outstanding Student Success Center. I did provide access to the support that she needed to meet her goals, and I look forward to her success, right? And I think the trick is you have to find a way to provide the resources to support those individuals. Now, she did not have, in 68 years of life, I don't think she had any credit for prior learning. I don't think so, right, Terry? No, she didn't, because Terry worked with her, by the way. Outstanding. The president of our SGA is a 33-year-old male, former electrical contractor. Okay? And I'm not sure Chris, he may have done CLEP, he may have done some other options, but I'm just saying that was another opportunity perhaps that we needed to pursue. We have an RN to BSN program. How many of you have RN BSNs? Okay, all adult learners, aren't they? By definition, they already have an associate's degree and a registered nurse license, and they are pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Nursing because their industry is changing. It's like ours. It's shaking at the core. Every RN BSN program is an adult learner program. And one of the things that we're looking at is partnering with medical delivery, major medical delivery facilities in our region, and offering on-site access to RN BSN. in a hybrid mode, which you have to develop academic programs that support adult learners. And go back to my comment about those three for-profits. We're not providing the access, we're not providing the flexibility, and therefore we're losing those students to an alternative. And by the way, the hospitals that we're working with, they're going to the for-profits because the for-profits will work with them. And we have not been as cooperative as perhaps we should. But that's just one example of an academic program that we are working toward to enhance the adult learning. We have two new baccalaureate programs that we're bringing online at Gordon. A program in health services and informatics administration, which will both be a presence and an online option. It's going to be a popular program for adult learners. We're going to be bringing on a new Bachelor of Science degree in Human Services, which again is going to be a popular program for adult learners. So what I want to encourage us all to do is look at those programs that would be attractive to the adult learner. I got an email from our Vice President of Academic Affairs this morning. For the last year and a half, he's been on a fishing expedition. He calls it fishing. He's fishing for former Gordon students who left with 50 or more hours of credit. And he's trying to find them to see if they have earned at least an associate's degree and try to re-engage them in the academic process. He had a huge success this morning, and he was sharing it with the team. And a young man got his letter, his communication came in, evaluated transcripts, Peter Higgins, and found out that he had indeed taken a course at another university that could transfer back and he could complete an associate's degree. And oh, by the way, he wants to pursue a Bachelor of Science in Biology at Gordon, which that's what we're going to have to do. So we have to have a robust combination of tools. And prior learning assessment is just one tool, right? Very important tool. I will tell you that the faculty have got to be on board with this. I cannot edict any of this. You know that. I know that. If the faculty embrace it with the leadership of the chief academic officer, then we can implement it. But the faculty have to be knowledgeable and they have to embrace it. I sat through an excellent session by our friends at Asse in the previous hour, and they were asking a bunch of questions. And one of the questions, I want that slide 20, by the way. It's slide 20 in your presentation. How many of you are in the session? One of the questions was, are your faculty receptive to what? To innovation and change. And how many people raised their hands? 0. I didn't raise my hand. I was guilty too. Now, that's just indicative of the challenge that we face as we roll this out, okay? And it's not something we cannot overcome. It's just something we have to acknowledge and work through. And this is the core that does that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're fortunate to have such leaders, aren't we? Who would like to ask a question before I start on some?
The spread.
Yeah.
The question is for Svi about the spread project.
Our spread project is basically a way of engaging adult learners. Okay, it stands for Southern Polytechnic. Help me, Dawn, here. Re-engagement of adult towards adult degrees, yes. And we're doing, in fact, quite a number of things in terms of trying to make our programs more attractive to adults. You've heard several of the other campuses talking about having university resources available at broader ranges of time, in the evening, on weekends, things like that. Okay, we're still a small campus, but we're moving towards making things more available. We've hired a night librarian, for example. Our library is now going to be open later than it hitherto has been. One of the things that we've done, I think that's especially interesting, is we're developing a number of low residency degree programs. And so, for example, we've got a partnership, as I mentioned before, with the Technical College System of Georgia, wherein students are going to be able to get an associate's degree in a number of different degree areas related to industrial engineering technology, electrical engineering technology, mechanical engineering technology, and some of the subfields thereof. And they're going to be able to go, and in addition, management and information technology. And they're going to be able to go and to complete their degrees while not leaving home. Okay, and so somebody who's living out in, Valdosta, Marietta's a long ways from there. Okay, but we've got an arrangement now that they'll be able to get a lot of the materials online, both synchronously and asynchronously, and we're delivering the laboratory components in a low residency format. Okay, the whole idea here is greater access, right, and us being able to fulfill our statewide mission. With regard to military students, we're, of course, designated as a military-friendly institution, and we accept the Dante's and other military sort of articulated courses via ACE recommendations, and we're trying to do more things in that direction to attract and to be of service, okay, to our adult military students. We traditionally have served the adult market, and so most of our courses are scheduled in multiple sections on kind of a rotating basis. And so the course may be offered in the day in the fall, but it'll be offered in the evening in the spring because, in fact, our enrollments are heavier at night than they are in the daytime. Okay, and so you can probably find a little space on our campus in the afternoon, okay, but if you try to find open classroom space at night, you're going to have a hard time doing it, okay, because, again, we're serving the adult market pretty robustly. And, in fact, the latest degree programs that we've got at SPSU, which are our degrees in engineering, right, we've currently got 6 different degree programs in engineering, are all evening programs. Yes, you can take them during the day, but they all started as evening programs to serve, right, a very different part of the market than by our colleagues. We're here. Yeah, our colleagues here at Georgia Tech. And so there are a lot of aspects to our spread program, right, where we're really trying to look at what are the ways that adult students can be re-engaged. I was interested in hearing what you just said about that fishing expedition, because we're doing the same thing in terms of trying to find people who left SPSU with a significant number of credits who can come back and complete a degree with us. Okay, because too many of us have got graduation rates that frankly could be better. Okay, and so we're working to make ours better, and this spread program is a really important part of how we're doing that.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I'd like to throw one. This might be one of the harder ones, but each of you, I am sure, spends long hours balancing budgets, and in these economic times, trying to keep our institutions afloat and our faculty paid. I'm wondering about how you look at PLA as a net win or a net loss. So based on the compensation structure and the financial structure we customarily use, does this impact it, and if so, positively or negatively?
It's a win. And you may say, well, you don't get to teach the class, but we get to teach the next class, and the next, and the next. And I know that certainly the faculty have a bit of angst when they say, well, you're going to give credit for, name those courses. But the reality is, the more we can support the students' progress toward graduation, the better off we will be, and I think certainly the better off they will be. So I'm okay with the credit that is earned through a PLA assessment process, and I think the point's already been made, and I think in this room we all concur that this is not experience-based credit. This is learning, outcomes-based acknowledgement, okay? And some of our faculty aren't there yet. Some of our faculty still think that what we're doing is awarding credit for working somewhere or doing something, but the reality is it's what learning objectives were acquired during that experience. So I see it as a positive. Now, I'll tell you, budgets are tough. A day without budgets is like a day without sunshine, you know, every day.
A little different perspective on that, and I think it is a positive, but as we're looking at statewide and nationally, a trend in budgeting being an outcome budgeting process rather than an input or an admissions process. If we shorten the time to completion, we lower the total cost of completion, and our numbers look better from an outcome standpoint, then as the trend changes in our state legislature or from the national perspective, then we will probably bode better budget-wise in receiving funding because we've done a better job on the results end.
Yeah, I may have a different view. I think it's too early to tell whether it's a positive or a negative. Right now, the amount of credit that the average student gets via prior learning assessment in all of its forms is relatively small. I think, if a student comes in and they've brought in 2 courses via advanced placement or IB and take a CLEP exam to get perhaps a 3rd course, that's an unusual amount. Okay, most students don't get that much. And the amount of, the number of students who come in and try to get credit via portfolio and so forth, in some of our programs it's large, but in most of our programs it's quite small. And so long as the numbers are relatively small, then the way we currently do things fiscally are probably fine. Okay, but I'm concerned if the market changes in the way that people say it might. So if people start coming in the door with large numbers of credits that they've taken in, say, some of these massive open online courses, or that they've just learned in other ways, we currently charge very, very little in order to assess. Okay, most places will charge on the order of $50 or something like that, right, in order to take a challenge exam and to get 3 credits. Okay, and let's see, if I'm not a mathematician, but that comes to approximately $16 a credit. And I know I can't run my university on $16 a credit. Okay, similarly, if somebody takes a CLEP exam, right, if they take 1 CLEP exam and they bring it in, okay, like you say, we've got 117 other credits, okay, in our degree program, so 1's no big deal. But what if this became the norm? Okay, what if it became the norm that students would walk in the door with 30 credits worth of prior learning, 10 courses worth? Okay, that changes the economic equation considerably. And I think something that we as academic institutions need to look at is the changing role that our faculty are going to be called upon to play, where they're going to be much less of being the imparter of knowledge, right, up in the front, and the creator of individual acts of craftsmanship that we call courses, and they're going to be called upon much more to be people who are facilitating learning and who are assessing learning. I think that the facilitation and the assessment are going to become larger parts of what we do. That being the case, I think we need to have a price structure that follows logically from that. Right now, our price structure is basically you pay money to get access to the brilliance that issues forth from my lips. Okay, but these days you can get that for free online from very good places. Okay, so it seems to me to have our budget depend on that, not a good plan. Where we're going to be going is facilitation and assessment, which means we can't be charging $15 a credit for assessment. Okay, so I think that there's a danger there. We need to keep our eyes open to what's going on. If ultimately this wave turns out to be just a small ripple, okay, then we're okay. But if this thing is as big as some people say it's going to be, then I think some pretty fundamental fiscal changes are headed our way.
Can I make it just a comment and ask a question? I don't think it's a ripple. I think it's a pretty big wave. And if you look at prior learning assessments and the standard CLEP or the standard AP or similar type of credit that we would award at entry, that's going to continue to be fairly nominal. But you talked about your relationship with the TCSG. Now all of a sudden a student can bring to me 20 courses, 10, 15, 20 courses, 30 hours, 45 hours, and that dynamic changes tremendously what programs I deliver. Now, everybody in this room realizes that our first 2 years of academic course structure has supported the second 2 years. And if you have graduate programs, then the undergraduate programs have supported the graduate program. So if within the university system, a significant percentage of those first 2 year courses are earned or provided credit through another option, that's going to change the world for us. And we know that. Now, the challenge is, I don't think we're going to stop the wave. We're going to have to ride the wave. And it's not going to always be pretty. I do hear your $15 a credit hour. I would suggest to you that my friends in the legislature and my friends on the regents would like that cost to stay low.
And I agree, and that's the real challenge, isn't it? Because everybody is looking for a free education, okay? But at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay for it. Because maybe the faculty at your campus are a little different, but ours expect to be paid, okay? And, you know, they'd like their salaries to go up occasionally. And so, you know, it's a fiscal viability model, and it's going to be really challenging depending on just how big this wave is.
I take a little different look on it. From an admission standpoint, I'll give you, for example, what happened this fall to me. I had a student come in who was military. She just gotten out of the military, and I had to assess her ACE transcript, and I was able to give her a probably about 15 hours of credit for her. Well, her mom went to Atlanta Metro years ago, and so she brought her in. She's like, they are really working with me. And she brought her daughter, so I got a 3-for-1 deal. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I like it. And if we don't look at it that way, they'll go somewhere where folks will look at it that way.
Well, and again, I think for a while that's going to work, but it reminds me of the old joke, I lose money on each unit of product, but I make it up in volume. Okay, no, that just means you lose money faster. Okay, and so the reality is we still have to make it pay. And in an environment where there's declining state support, okay, for our programs, and we're more and more tuition reliant, okay, if a large hunk of what we do goes away and gets replaced by things that bring in a lot less revenue, then the places that are most at risk are the places that offer the largest fraction of courses that are most likely to be taken that way, which means that if you're offering a lot of liberal arts programs, that means if you're offering a lot of first and second year courses, just like you were saying.
If you're an access
you're at
institution like
Yeah.
we are, we're in the bullseye.
That's right, you're right
And
in
we
the
know that.
bullseye. And so, you know, for us, the students coming in from the technical colleges actually work well because engineering programs have traditionally a high attrition rate. And so these kids come in and they replace some of the students who attrited, and so they fill in our upper division courses. That's good for us because we're using resources that we've already got. Okay, so we're increasing our efficiency. Okay, but for the core courses, this is a real concern. And I think that it's one that we as a university system need to look very seriously at.
I'll tell you, as a point of comparison, I came to USG last year
Since we're taping this, we appreciate you.
I came to USG last year after being in Missouri for 20 years. And in the state of Missouri, we don't have what we talk about here as dual enrollment. We have dual credit, which is not students coming to your campus to take classes, but high school students taking college credit classes in the high school with teachers that have been, approved by the universities. But it was not uncommon for a student to come in with 30 credit hours of dual credit. We had a campus of 20,000 students where I was at, and when I left close to a year ago, we had just broken the 50% plane. Of 50% of our students were coming in with credit from someplace else. And on top of that, in Missouri, they have a program called A+, where if you come from an A+ high school, and there are more and more of them, you get the first 2 years at a two-year school free. And as several of my fellow administrators were fond of saying, it's hard to compete with free. And so you had to not only compete against the high schools offering the credit for 50 cents on the dollar or less, but students going for 1 or 2 years to a community college for free. And so you had to sell what's the value of a 4-year degree. Why should you come here? And knowing that you're going to have a growing percentage of students who choose to go someplace else first, what do you focus on? And we had people who were saying, maybe we should just be focusing on the last 2 years in graduate education and start to leave the first 2 years to other places. They hadn't gotten to that point, but I don't think it's obviously not just Georgia, and it can be an even bigger challenge than it has been in Georgia so far.
Yeah.
I did. For us at Atlanta Metro, as the president said, as an access institution, this is a concern. We do sit in the bullseye. When I think about the PLA opportunities, they really, at our campus, of course, they are geared towards the AP credits. Students can get the AP. The CLEP exams, students can get the CLEP. We don't have many courses that, at this point, that will be for the portfolio. So when I think about the opportunities from the high schools that the students have, and I came from the state of Florida, which did it very similarly to the way that it was done in Missouri, and that I hired faculty members at the high school to teach the college credits. That is a concern, and it sits us right in the bullseye, but hopefully what will end up happening is through the funding formula or whatever, the graduation rate has to be an impact that can help with the funding, recognizing what is occurring on the front end in terms of the PLA credits.
Thank you. Great discussion. Any more questions from the audience? Okay, I have one to sort of leave us with, and that has to do with sort of the disruptions that are occurring in higher education. I'm sure you've all heard that word several times since you've been at the conference. And so if any of you would like to take this question on, it's sort of, how do you see higher education looking in the future? What might the changes be, and how would prior learning assessment be a part of that?
Well, I think higher education is going to increasingly bifurcate in the future. I think that, for some kinds of students, higher education is going to look just like it looks today. Okay, they're going to come to college, they're going to have a 4-year residential experience. It's going to be about the courses and about the experience, and so, that's the traditional picture. How big a fraction will that be? That's where my crystal ball gets a little bit foggier, okay, and that's the part that I think we need to monitor, because that's kind of where our fiscal model is based, okay, is on students doing that. I think that for a lot of us, our campuses haven't looked like that for a while, okay, and we've got a lot of adult students who are very degree focused. They're much less interested, as our colleague said here, in some of the social experience that is so important at college. And they're going to come in with increasing amounts of prior learning that they're going to have gathered in various ways. And so I think that prior learning assessment is going to be an absolutely critical element of how we address the needs of those students. Because regardless of whether they learned this by going to the library and reading a book, God forbid, or if they did this in a massive open online course, whether they did this in the 1950s version that I still remember of the University of the Air, right, and watched the course on TV and had something mailed to them that, they took the tests in and so forth, or any one of 1,000 other variations, we're going to be called upon to assess it. And we're going to be called upon to certify that they have met the learning outcomes that are necessary in order to get the degrees that they seek. Okay, and that's prior learning assessment. Okay, and that's why we've got to do it. There's no choice. Okay, because regardless of what that fraction is, it's there. Right? I think that something that's really important that's going to come our way is our faculty, as I said before, are going to need to look more at the assessment part of their jobs and at the facilitation part of their jobs. And even when the students, do their PLA and they haven't met every outcome, the story doesn't end there. Okay, how do they then achieve the missing outcomes? That's part of the facilitation part of it. I think as we're expected to have higher graduation rates, again, the facilitation aspect of the program becomes more important. How do you get the student from where they are, which is often not where we'd like them to be, okay, to where they need to be? Okay, that's the facilitation part. And then again, the assessment at the end. And so our faculty are going to have to become, I think, experts in that. I think we're going to be delivering courses in a more online, low residency sort of formats because people have got lives that they can't necessarily interrupt to go so easily to the campus. And so I think we're going to be taking advantage of technology in that way. And I think that how big is that fraction going to be? Again, I don't know. Okay, the crystal ball is hazy at this point, but that's what we've got to monitor. And so that's kind of the way I see disruption, heading our way. Okay, and I think that we've got some tools, and PLA is one of them, in terms of how we're going to face this disruption and be able to, just like my colleague here said, instead of being drowned by the wave, being able to surf the wave.
I think as we talk about what is the institution going to look like in the future, I'm going to take a real pragmatic and three-dimensional look at that. For the last 20, 30, maybe 40 years, we have had a trend in this country that is manufacturing and blue-collar jobs left this country with the closing of mills and plants. There was a trend to say that everybody needs to go to college. Nationwide, high school curriculums have shifted from a two-track system of you can be career prep or tech prep or college prep, that the career tech and tech track avenue went away. Schools closed their shop classes in the high schools. Everybody was geared and pushed towards college. I think we've reached the biggest part of that bubble because we've realized that not all of the tech jobs went to India, and that when you need an electrician or a plumber or an auto mechanic, you can't call 1-800-INDIA to get that fixed. So I think we're seeing a resurgence of the possibility that you can make a really good living as an electrician or a plumber without going to college. And as we add more adult learners or alternative methods to get a college degree, we might actually be facility-wise as big as we're going to get or we're overbuilt. We may not be seeing in our future building a continuous increasing number of dormitories or other physical facilities because our budget can't support it. And even if our enrollment were to stabilize or go up, those may not be resident full-time people on our campus. And so I think we're looking at a restructuring of what we think the institution of college is and what it will look like in the future.
I welcome the disruptions. And when talking about the disruptions, if we're talking about a MOOC versus competition from the for-profits, I think it's time that has occurred in higher education. We have not innovated in higher education over the last 100 years. And now when you have these disruptions, it causes us to think about how to innovate and how to change. One of the reasons why I like working at an access institution is that we have a heterogeneous population. We have students from all backgrounds, different levels of preparation, where as faculty we are challenged with how do we reach those students. And oftentimes I'm in a quandary with faculty about the homogeneous way that they were taught at the university, working in this heterogeneous environment. So these disruptions now causes us to think about the importance of innovation. And that's what we have to do as educators, is think about how do we do this differently with the heterogeneous population coming to our colleges and universities. And it really does take all of us thinking about that, because they transfer from Atlanta Metro to Southern Poly. So they will have to deal with that mixture too. So this is our opportunity, I think, in terms of truly transforming education. And I've told my faculty this, that we only get one shot of this, at least in a lifetime. And it's upon us now to think creatively, outside of the box. We're all smart people, that we could do this different. The time is now. These disruptions, I think, are welcome.
I agree with my colleagues. I think the interesting thing is we embrace it or it runs over us like a tidal wave. How many of you have read Academically Adrift? If you haven't, read it. I assure you the Chancellor has read it, okay? And probably every member of the Board of Regents. Now, you may agree with it or disagree with it. And I'll tell you, I agree with it and I disagree with it, okay? How many of you have read The Innovative University? Clayton Christensen. If you haven't read it, read it, right? Get a perspective on how things are going to impact us. And there are others. Those are just two citations. Our faculty collectively have to embrace this change. They have to embrace this innovation. They cannot remain entrenched. They cannot stick their head in the sand and say, I'm going to do it the way I've always done it, because it was good enough for me, it's good enough for my students. That just will not be able to be, we won't survive. We will become irrelevant. And we cannot afford to be irrelevant to the students and the state that depends on us for its future. So, you know, I don't know what the next thing is going to be, and I know that there are a lot of fads out there. I don't know whether MOOC is real or Memorex, right? I don't know whether it's a real course. And by the way, I'm taking a MOOC right now from Harvard. It's really good. It's on ethics. And boy, it's good. Now, I'm learning something. I'm not getting any credit for it. I'm not looking for credit, right? But if you have an ethics course in your curriculum and a student proposes that you consider this, how are you going to respond? Right? How are you going to respond? And I hope you would be open-minded and flexible. I hope you would look for ways to integrate these new options into your curriculum, not as substitutes or surrogates, but as an integral part of what you're doing. And then recognize that the era of the traditional college experience is indeed shrinking. I agree. My crystal ball is really not very good either, but I'll tell you what, we may not need any more residence halls per se. We may not need any more traditional dining halls per se. We may need other things that would allow students to access education without all the trappings of the 19th century. And that might get us further down the road.
Are you glad this is taped? This has been a wonderful session, and I thank you so much. Could we have a hand for our presenters? That was inspiring.